I knew which Airsoft M16A1 to pick.
Fear not, my little farblet, because today on the Gear Locker, we're going to be talking about the Airsoft M16A1 replicas available to you on the market. Some you can buy, some you build, and we're also going to put some examples head-to-head in this video.
Oh my god!
Now, if you've been in the Y-Milsim, reenacting, or Airsoft space as long as I have, you've seen a thing or two. You remember when Classic Army was the peak? Or a little bit later when GMP, one of the best on the market, was dying out. But before we get into all the weeds of the things that you can find, let's talk about the couple examples that I have in front of me. For this video, I wanted to go to the two opposite extremes, while it's still being an M16A1. One that is more budget-minded and budget-friendly, versus one that has more of the details and build in mind. So the first half of this video is going to be talking about these two builds that I have in front of me. The first being an ENC M16A1. There are multiple versions of this, but this is the basic model, and we'll get into that. Versus the one that I use at all the events, my beautiful, custom-built GMP base. This thing's got some real parts on it, and we'll get there. Now, in the generic Airsoft sphere, especially with M16A1s, nowadays you have quite a few options, but the majority of them are lower end and lower budget. That doesn't mean they're all bad, and we're going to talk about some of the best deals you can find out there. But this M16A1 is what I would consider the minimally acceptable one for any kind of serious military simulation event like Broken Arrow events, or your average Airsoft build for a Vietnam loadout. You see, this thing has no fancy bells and whistles, and also misses the mark on a couple small points. But it also hits the mark on many that others on the market, especially in this price bracket, just fail at. This is a very basic idea of an M16A1. You have your A1 upper and lower, with that full fencing here. Your classic triangle handguard and pencil style barrel are tipped with a 3-prong flash hider. Of course, the A1 pistol grip is nice, but the Type D stock is where this thing really shines. Historically, a lot of Airsoft M16A1 replicas had the Type E trapdoor stock, which came post-war. But seeing this, which is a nice padded end piece, on a slightly shorter stock overall, is a nice detail that I like. Internally, you're looking at a very basic V2 style gearbox. There's no MOSFET in this thing. The motor is a standard brushed motor, and your hop-up is the modern age rotary style. As you pull the charging handle back, you can see it accessed here. It is all plastic, but it performs decently well, and we'll take a look at how this performs later in this video. You do have an all-metal body, although it is cheap pop metal, a relatively flimsy but also relatively solid plastic triangle handguard, and a decent same plastic stock. And before we get to the cons, you might be wondering why I have this piece if I already have my own build. This is not a sponsored video whatsoever, but this came from Combat Sports Supply for Broken Arrow events. I run the rental program there, and this is the piece that I picked because not only do I have good experience with the ENC M16A2, but I know that this thing hits the minimum marks and will be rugged enough to last out in the field. So huge shout out to Combat Sports Supply for helping us get this. They didn't supply them, they helped us get them at a slightly better deal so we could bring it to players and reenactors and travelers worldwide who want to come to a Bay event. In addition to all the features that I had mentioned, I really like on the lower receiver how it's an A1 profile, not A2, in that you don't have the reinforcement up here and in the rear, but there are some issues with it. And really, those are the main nitpicky spots that I can find on this replica, which is again why I picked it. In addition to having the safe semi and auto markings on the right side of the receiver, they also don't have any proper Colt trademarks, which this isn't the trademarked very high-end version, it's just the basic one. So they have the ENC logo here. I also dislike that the body pins that they used have these little end caps here that get screwed in. When it's against your person, you can't really tell or see it, but in any other photos where this thing is hanging out, it is a little too visible for my taste. Still, it keeps them nice and secure, so nothing too terrible to complain about other than some aesthetics. Now this can be found for under $300 on various websites. And they do have another version of this we're gonna get into for part 2 that I love. It fixes almost all the complaints that I just gave you guys. But now let's take a look at my personal build. This right here, I know I picked it up by the carry handle, is my custom built Airsoft M16A1. The base model for this is a GMP, and truthfully, it keeps a lot of the same complaints that I had. It does have absolutely stunning trademarks all over, which is correct, but on the opposite side, in addition to having a small recessed screw in the front receiver pin, it also has the safe semi and auto here. It does maintain that M16A1 profile, where it has no reinforcement here or here, but a full fence around the magazine release. The barrel assembly and front sight post and all is stock, but that's about where it ends. You see, internally, I did a complete overhaul of this, but you know me. Of course, the outside and the aesthetics are where this thing shines. I'm more a form over function kind of reenactor. I just want the stuff to look beautiful. And that's why I have a real M16A1 handguard on it and a real M16A1 Type D stock. And truthfully, it wasn't that hard to do. This was basically a drop-in fit, and the stock, all I needed to do was find a King Arms full stock buffer tube assembly kit, which all it does is have a separate tube in here that allows you to screw the back of the stock in, similar to a real AR. Internally, I did the majority of the upgrades to the hop-up and barrel assembly. I have a 4 UAD bucking and nub in here in a Max Model Pro hop-up set. I have a ZCI 6.03 Type 4 barrel in here, and this thing is shooting beautifully at 150, 175 feet, which is the majority of the engagement distances. I would bet that it shoots even further, but I can't test it because my yard isn't that long. I've got a Rocket high torque motor in here, but it's paired with a VFC Avalon gearbox, which the only thing I ever did to it was installing a new tappet plate spring to help with mid-cap syndrome. Truthfully, I love the performance of the stock VFC Avalon gearbox. It's nothing blowing anyone out of the water, but it's been reliable and consistent. I'm getting 1.19 joules pretty consistently with this thing. And of course, re-greasing, re-shimming and all does help, but as a stock performing gearbox, combined with all the other parts I put in it, this thing functions exactly how I'd want it to. It's not a sports car that needs a lot of maintenance, but it's a workhorse that looks aesthetically pretty darn good. Here comes the problem, and here's where the comparison really lies. The performance of these two things is not that far off. Of course, the hop-up upgrades, the range accuracy and all is going to be drastically improved, but for the price difference of all the parts versus a completely stock gun, the benefits aren't that drastic. You see, for around that $260, $270 price range, getting a stock gun like this will perform just fine for what you need it for. The FPS on this thing is relatively consistent as well, as you guys can see. And while my GMP does have a great function to it, if I were just starting out or looking for something that would be a buy once, cry once situation, I don't know if I would go through the trouble of compiling so many different pieces, trying to make them all work together, and searching for years to find one part that allows me to put on a real stock. Do I have any regrets for building out my custom build with all these real parts? Not at all. This thing feels stunning. Not to mention it looks realistic. But if I was just starting out, I don't know if I would go for something as crazy as this. Which, that brings us to the second part of this video, and that's all the replicas on the market. Because nowadays there's quite a few, and I wanted to break down for you what you might want to keep an eye out for. Because you see, there's kind of three categories. There's the cheap ones, which are the $180 to sort of $200 range. Then there's mid-range, which I would argue is anywhere from like $225 to $270, $280. And then you get the $300 and above club. And I wouldn't argue that those are necessarily better, and you'll see what I mean. Now, most of these recommendations are going to come from evic.com, mainly because they have the largest quantity of options available. Although I am an affiliate with them, so I'll link some ones down below that I really, really like. Buying through my affiliate link does give me a little kickback, so it is a great way to support the channel, but all I ever ask is that you like and comment, and tell me what you guys think. And if you're feeling really lovely, subscribe. It greatly helps out the channel and allows me to show you guys some pretty cool gear. Now, let's start with those basic bare bones budget ones. There's of course the JG, or the double bell. But the most prolific one, the one that has the largest variety in this budget category, is SEMA. Now, all of the options that I just explained have issues. Some of them more external than internal, but other ones have internal problems too. Now, the basic bare bones are like the SEMA Sportline models, or the JG, or even the double bell, which just hits that $200 price mark. And these often don't have the correct markings on the outside of the receivers, and sometimes have the incorrect receivers in general. A lot of them either are A2 style lower receivers where they have reinforcement where reinforcement shouldn't be, or they're just flat out wonky. Keep that in mind as you're searching for it. When you're looking for an M16A1, especially the lower receiver is a defining characteristic of it. It's not just a triangle handguard and a stock. Which, speaking of, most of these come with Type E stocks, which again is post-war. So that's definitely something to keep an eye out for. However, even as you move up in this price range to some of the other SEMA models, you might run into other issues, like internally, their MOSFETs being not that great. And the whole QBS system, while cool in its own right, often limits you to what you can do, in that you're kind of locked into the system where the rear spring guide screws in from the outside through the buffer tube. It's a weird system. And of course, with a hacksaw, a Dremel, and a Dream, you can get through anything, but That, compounded with the fact that the MOSFET often has issues, doesn't make it the best option out there. You see, in my own personal experience, the MOSFET that they use doesn't use the best plastic on the trigger arm for the micro switch. So when that breaks, you either have a gun that completely ghosts you, or one that shoots on its own. And it's not a SIG P320, so we don't want that. Are they the worst options? No, absolutely not. But that's where I'd recommend going for something like this one. This, while it still does have some minor quirks on the receiver, can be found at Combat Sports Supply for pretty cheap, actually just about that $250 to $260 price range at the moment. But this kicks us into the second category, and that's the mid-range. And aside from this ENC option, there's only one other that I'd really recommend. And believe it or not, it also comes from ENC. And by really recommend, I think I'm underselling it because this thing is gorgeous. If I had to start fresh, that's the option I would buy. And let me tell you why. In addition to having the correct Type D stock, triangle handguard, pencil barrel, all that jazz, the receiver on it is the best out of any Airsoft replica that I have ever seen for an M16A1. Here's what I mean. Not only does it have the proper Colt markings, but it has the proper lack of reinforcements, and on the flip side of it, has no safe semi-auto. That's right, even this beautiful GMP doesn't have that level of accuracy. Internally, I have personal experience with the ENC M16A2. It works beautifully. Out of the box, there's nothing you need to upgrade on it. Granted, you could always do that down the line because it's a standard V2 with a MOSFET, the Kestrel ETU, which not only offers you some snappy trigger response, but some programmability. It just works. Now again, I'm going off of my experience with the A2 model. Internally, they're identical, and with the externals on the M16A1 that they put together there, I don't think there's a better option on the market. I'm gonna link it down below, again, with my affiliate link, which supports out the channel by giving me a little kickback. So if it's something you wanna pick up, check it out. And again, this can be had on eVic or Combat Sports Supply, but this also leaves room for that upper tier budget, the $300 plus range. Here we get some interesting models for your Vietnam, Milsim, or reenactor sphere. You see, the first one in this price range is the Toki Marui, and I'm just gonna be flat out when I say this, you're more paying for the Toki Marui name and internal magic than you are of anything else. It's a plastic body, and it's standard old Airsoft. The new gen of stuff is the EMG line. This EMG historic line, while I have never personally owned, for a reason I'll explain in a second, I've seen and held many of them. I've been in the Broken Arrow event circle for 6 years now, so I remember when these things first came out. Saw the quirks, saw the revisions, and see the model that we have today. The oldest model of them had the same issue with the SEMA MOSFET that I explained earlier. They are OEM'd by SEMA, so it does kind of lend itself to having that issue early on. But they did fix that issue and install gate asters in them. These MOSFETs are pretty solid for what they are, being a basic standard style Airsoft MOSFET nowadays, and they provide pretty solid performance. The only issue I have heard of one in recent times, in fact it was only a few weeks ago at the time of me recording, was the pin to hold the orange flash hider cover on had protruded into the flash hider itself, causing BBs to misfire like crazy. And for BBs misfiring, I mean like going all over the place, breaking, all that stuff. Other than that, I have heard in person pretty much no internal complaints. However, there's a problem with them that comes in the externals. And for something in that top tier line, you would expect it to be a perfect M16A1 replica, right? That's where it's not. It's actually of an XM16E1. Now this isn't inaccurate for Vietnam. In fact, a lot of Airsoft players, Milsim, reenactors, they will tend to choose this option because it is correct for early to mid-war. However, once you see around that mid-war time frame when everyone started getting M16A1s, the only thing you really see after that is just parts of the XM16E1s lingering about. Granted, for units this could be very different, but the average frontline infantry grunt got the M16A1 from that mid to late war period for sure. Internally, they're great. Externally, they're solid replicas of the XM16E1, so they're a viable option for sure. And of course, I'll link them down in the description as well. Now, we've talked about quite a few different options, and I'm gonna give you guys one more tip before I sign you off. If you guys want to find magazines, these things have been out of stock everywhere. These short 20 round style mid-cap magazines hold about 100 BBs, and unless you're willing to shop overseas, there's a high demand and not a big supply, so I would recommend going used. Airsoft Marketplace on Reddit, Hop Up, Discord groups, that's where you're going to find these for good deals. This is the Gear.Locker. Thanks for sticking around this long. See you guys out in the jungle. That was so corny. Full grown adult, by the way.